Lord have mercy. Ooh, Lord.
The deadly Thanksgiving fire is classified as a homicide.
The lighter fluid was placed into his mouth, and he burned to death.
I've never witnessed something so horrific before.
I ain't got time for these lies, okay?
You think I poured some damn gas on this man?
Do you want to rule out everything before you charge a person?
You need to start getting your story straight, and you need to be straight right now.
You just trying to get me out of here so you can move that bitch in here.
If you get told half the murder, they will kill you.
She is evil, hateful, and low down. All of the above.
Ooh, Lord.
It was Thanksgiving Day. I remember buckling in my son in his car seat, and next thing we know, that house right across the street from us is smoking a whole lot. So I immediately called 911.
Is this Brownlee house?
Yeah.
We arrived at the fire scene within minutes of 911 call. I witnessed 2 windows that had been breached, smoke coming out of them, smoke coming from the roof. The fire has got some air, it's really burning, and we got our work cut out for us.
My family, they come outside, and I remember hearing that somebody was indeed in the house. So at this point, our hearts dropped.
The most important thing is to get the victims out. We looked for a point of entry into the house, which on this house was going to obviously be the front door. They went in searching for the victim, trying to search thoroughly each room and bedroom for occupants. They searched the house until they made it to a bedroom. They found the victim in the bed. He was in the room with the fire was breaching out of the windows. He was within 10 feet of those windows. The bed was heavily consumed with fire. It was clear that he had passed away.
Me being from West Point, I just knew William Brownlee to be a respectful person. He was a church-going guy. He was 62 years of age. He had multiple sclerosis.
William Brownlee Sr., he lived there with his daughter-in-law, Latoya, and his son, William Brownlee Jr. William Brownlee Sr. was bedridden, and they both were taking care of him because of some health issues he had going on at the time. I just hated that fact that, hey, there was somebody that was in the house. That was a very difficult moment, and it was horrific.
I had never smelled someone burning. It is an indescribable smell, like you just couldn't even imagine.
He was bedridden. He didn't even have a chance to get up or try to escape the room. He was just there to suffer.
My gut was telling me something's really, really strange here. The fire was almost completely in William Sr.'s bedroom. The rest of the house was just heavily smoke damaged.
From the bed to where Mr. Brownlee laid and the wall right above his head, all of it was heavily burned, way worse from how it was on the other side of the room. And then I saw where the outlet, it was very heavily burned.
That seems very suspicious because it was a very new house. It was built 2 years before prior. They're built with modern wiring.
And to really cause the damage that it did, electrical fire just alone would not make this fire angry like it did. You definitely want to get down to the bottom of what went wrong for this fire to become fully engulfed in this one particular room.
I remember going to the back porch of the home. There where I found a lot of fluid bottle, and I took it into evidence.
I believe that the fire chief, he was pretty much confident that something went wrong in that room. He believed something was started for that fire to get so hot in certain areas that he wanted to go ahead and call the state fire marshal.
Latoya, she showed up in her vehicle. She gets out her car. She's crying. She's hysterical.
What we learned from the initial contact with Miss Latoya Brownlee was she had been visiting family for Thanksgiving before this incident took place. Then she left and went shopping with her auntie, Miss Virgie Gardner.
And that's when she got the call that the house was on fire. So she came back to the home. With it being Thanksgiving Day, you would think that everybody would have been together And that left me wondering in my mind, okay, something else is going on here. It was almost like you just knew, like something just wasn't right.
Take a seat right there.
Biggest question was if this fire was actually intentionally set, and the next question was, if it was, why?
Can you give me a rundown of yesterday and what all took place?
All my brothers met at my house, and after that, we was going to my mom's house in Pontotoc in order to have Thanksgiving dinner. So my wife left home first before I did. She went to dinner in Uno over her family's house. So I got a call about 4:26. Is when I actually got the call that my house was fully engulfed in flames.
Who gave you the call?
Tony Harris. He asked me where I was and told me I need to get to my house as soon as possible, that my house was on fire.
But did your wife ever call you at any time?
No.
Can you state your wife's name for the record?
Latoria Janae Brownlee.
Okay, how long y'all been married?
18 years. Actually, I was filing for divorce next week.
Did she know about this?
Yes. I had an eviction notice for her.
Right.
We're still under the same roof,
Right.
but I moved on with my life and started, seeing someone else. And she is pregnant. I said now by the time the child is born, yes, my child will be living under the same roof as me.
The fact that now she was being evicted from the house by him, and there would be an eviction hearing to have her removed from the house. Very important piece in this investigation.
So, when did all the problems and stuff start occurring?
Been occurring for many, many, many years. She tried to actually burn the house down 3 years ago. I stayed in Baker Road. I had a trailer there. I found burn marks on the wall on the sheetrock.
I learned before living with Mr. Brownlee Sr., Junior Brownlee, his wife, Latoria, they stayed in an old trailer. Junior Brownlee claims she tried to burn an outlet to start a fire. He said she used a plant to put it by an electrical outlet and light it up.
But she said that she didn't. I didn't actually call the police, but I will go to my grave believing that she done that.
Her and your dad get along pretty well?
I mean, yes. Yes, she used to, but I mean, since we've been going through our problems, she'll do anything to hurt me. So by hurting him, and she knows it hurts me.
If she got that angry before to try to start a house fire, she could have possibly got angry again to do the same.
Your dad was the owner of that house? Or
Yes, my dad was on.
Your dad was?
My dad was on.
9 times out of 10, if something was to happen to your dad, you was going to get the house.
I was going to get the house.
We are going to go over here to the house. Fire marshal going to be able to tell us where the fire started at.
You will know that today? Hopefully.
Should, hopefully.
The deputy fire marshals ruled out that it was any kind of electrical problems with the home. He basically told me that the fire was started by someone.
After going through the scene and examining like he did, he was also adamant that that fire started in that room. Now we have an intentional fire, and this is a murder investigation. So now we have a suspect that we need to find.
We began to look into the insurance claim. It went even over $20,000 policy. I didn't see enough there for that to be a motive coming from William Brownlee Jr. But on Latoria's hand, I looked at the fact of, you got this divorce situation. Pretty sure she was very upset. At that moment, she most definitely was a suspect for me.
I have Miss Virgie Gardner.
Gardner, yes.
You may run down how you and your niece came in contact yesterday.
We had Thanksgiving dinner, and after the dinner, we left coming to West Point to go to Walmart.
Right.
But when we got in West Point, she said, take me by the house to drop off this food. We went to by the house. This should have been like around 4, and she got out, went in, and she came back out less than 5 minutes, and we went to Walmart. Soon as we got to Walmart, she got a call saying, smoke coming out of your house. And I'm all upset now. I said, well, is your father-in-law in the house? She said, yes. So I really got nervous then. And then I could see smoke from Walmart parking lot in the air.
Right.
We just left the house.
The store that she went to was not even a mile, if that, from the actual home.
She left at 405, a cell phone video that shows the fire fully engulfed at 409. That definitely raises suspicion about what took place at that house.
A house fire does not go from 0 to that in that time frame, naturally. A gas leak would have more of an explosion type situation. There's not a real natural cause that's going to allow it to burn that fast, that quick.
Basically what you're telling me, y'all left from the residence around 4:05. Now, the person called 911 at 4:10, saying the house was in flames. And I got a video showing her the house in flames at that time. That room was burning before she left.
Really? She had to sit there and find. They're going through this divorce. And I told her just last week, I said, Tora, I said, don't do nothing stupid. She said, yeah, because I was I thought about going there and putting a knife in her. So, if I was asked, do I think she capable of doing this? I would say yes. She is evil, hateful, and low down, all of the above.
The Brownlee family, they live directly across the street from my family. I've never witnessed something so horrific before.
This is a small community, and the love of each other and the respect of each other pull us together. You hate to see a community hurt. You hate to see the families hurt.
My heart just heavy because just hated that fact that, hey, there was somebody that was in the house.
Oh, have mercy.
So after she went in the house and came back out to go to Walmart, what did she say?
She was talking about him, and when you see him, you just go ahead and tell him he wrong for what he doing. Tell her, leave that on you. I said, you just do what's right.
If an uncle or auntie say something about their niece or nephew, you could take it to the bank and cash it. Domestic situations can cause people to do some crazy things because, you know, hurt people hurt people.
At that point, I was pretty much sold on it being her, but I still had to prove it. I had to get more than just word of mouth. So I received a video that was on Facebook Live at the time that the fire started. And this was at like 4:09. The 911 call came in around 4:10, 4:11.
At 4:11, LaToya makes a post on Facebook about the Black Friday sale. You look at the time span, and it was very odd to me. I think she made that post to try to create an alibi or try to, you know, just say, hey, I didn't set a house afire.
What's up?
How you doing?
Fine, you?
Good. All right, you do understand you're still up on the Miranda, so you're still willing to speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's pointing to her. You know, this house was set on fire. The situation going on between her and her husband. She's the only one that went in the house. Now is the time we gotta get her to break and tell us the truth.
As of right now, just tell me your thoughts. Just let me know what's going on.
I hate it happened, and I love my father-in-law. I hate it happened, and I just want to know what this stemmed from. What started this fire.
All right, you left Unum Thursday around what time again?
Around 3:20, 3:30.
You left around 3:20, 3:30. What time you make it to town?
3:55.
And when you get to town, before you left Unum, was you headed home or was you headed to Walmart?
Head to Walmart.
All right, what made you go by the house?
They take my plate and I had to use the bathroom. And then I got in the house, took my plate to the kitchen, went to the bedroom to see him. He was in the bedroom. Then I was headed out. Then he asked for a piece of candy, and I gave it to him. And he said, "I smell some smoke." I said, "I smell some too." And I looked in the utility room, and I ain't see nothing burning or no smoke. And I went to the kitchen, make sure there wasn't on the eye, and I didn't see anything. And I came again, and I said, "I don't know what it is." And that was it, and I left.
You actually smelled smoke in the home and you still left? Common sense would have been like, I need to call somebody. I need to get somebody over here and see what's going on. It didn't sit well with me doing that interview with her.
How long was you at Walmart?
We was there no time. We pulled up in the parking lot and we was finna park, and we pulled back out.
What was the reason for that?
Somebody called.
Did they call on Facebook or on your phone?
Facebook.
It should still be on Facebook. Think you got time to take a look and see? She called you at 4:11.
Okay.
And y'all stayed on the phone about 1 minute and 3 seconds, right?
I guess.
Okay. Was you on Facebook around that time?
Was I on Facebook? I was at Walmart, so I probably not.
You are aware that there's a Facebook post on your page that was made at 4:11 said you was in Walmart parking lot.
Okay. Yeah, I guess.
You remember that?
I can't remember the post, but.
You remember making that post?
I don't remember.
You can remember what you did inside the house for those 5 minutes. But all of a sudden, now you don't remember. I think she kind of felt like we was closing in on her. I had to go at it a little harder.
From what I'm looking at and from what the fire marshal report is saying, either you wasn't at home at 4 o'clock or you was there when the fire started.
Well, I wasn't there when no fire started because I don't think I.
Did you go in the room?
I went in his bedroom.
All right, did you go in his bedroom when you first got to the house or was it right before you left?
I went to the kitchen, then I went to his bedroom. Then we talked and he wanted. And then
had you used the bathroom yet, like you said?
No, I hadn't used the bathroom.
But you told me you went to the bathroom. That's the reason why I said you went to the bathroom. You never said you didn't use the bathroom.
I didn't use it. I didn't use it.
So you lied to me, think like you used the bathroom?
Well, I went to the bathroom and I didn't have to go, so I didn't go. But I did.
Listen, you need to start getting your story straight. You need to be straight right now.
Okay, I'm
because I ain't got time for these lies. Okay.
I went to the bathroom and I didn't go. And I left out there and I went back to his room.
About how long was you in the house?
About 5 minutes. I did not see no fire, no smoke, no nothing. So you're not gonna make me say that. I did not see that, but I smelled it. I smelled it in the utility room, right in the area, the utility room and the bedroom. I smelled it.
Okay, we get that. The thing of it is, you still left.
I did.
Even though you smell smoke or whatever.
I thought it wasn't nothing because I ain't seen nothing. I left.
She continued to stick with her story over and over again. I'm still seeing the crime scene. I'm still seeing the remains of Mr. Brownlee. I'm still seeing how hot this room got. I want confessions. You still want to see if you can get her to go ahead and break.
Now I went to the kitchen, make sure they went on the stove.
Seems like you was pretty upset with him. So you got a lot of lying going on. You better start being straight. You pretty expert in them outlets, ain't you?
No, I'm not.
You ever fooled around one before?
No, I did not.
You have?
I haven't.
Never?
Never.
You spoke with your husband?
You told me 3 years ago, back at the trailer, when y'all got into it, you went and tampered with it to start a fire on the trailer.
It was right. I didn't mess with the outlet itself per se. It was a plant right by the outlet, and I put the plant on fire. That's what I tampered with.
Oh, so that the plant was put on fire.
The plant right there by the outlet. That what made the thing right there. But I didn't. I'd be a fool to go in and mess with this outlet and get shot. This crazy. Right there by
So how
the
you
outlet.
set the plant on fire?
It was a mattress.
A plant? A real live plant?
No, it was an artificial plant.
And you set it on fire with a mattress?
Mm-hmm.
We all had learned that LaToya Brownlee tried to set a previous house on fire because she got mad at Junior. And now, you know, the possibility of her doing this again after getting angry with her husband could be the very thing that started this fire.
I did not
messing with stuff, so not messing with the plant.
I did not mess
messing with an outlet.
I did not mess with no outlet at this new house. I did not do nothing, and you ain't gonna make me say I did something. I did not do nothing.
You did it with the outlet in the trailer, though. Is that what you're telling me?
I started right there by the outlet. The outlet probably caught on fire, but I'm not gonna put no fire to this outlet like this.
At that point, I was just like, all right, we're done. She didn't admit, yes, I set the house fire. But she attached herself to the timeline that we had.
So after that interview, I could have arrested her, but I didn't want to do it just yet because I knew I needed more evidence for it to stick.
It was just like a lemon. We was just trying to get all the juice as we could get out of that lemon. And so that's why we opted to continue this investigation.
The fire was intentionally set, so you start looking for accelerants that may have been poured there. What he saw was something was poured on the glove seat, the flooring, and the bed. He had a hydrocarbon detector. The hydrocarbon detector is going to pick up a petroleum product of some type. That detected some type of petroleum product was poured. It could have been lighter fluid, it could have been gasoline.
He added an interesting fact that there was also an accelerant on a outlet across the room from the bed. There was no accident at the electrical outlet. There was no faulty electrical outlet. There was an accelerant.
Somebody poured liquid on the outlet, trying to make it look like the outlet had started the fire. But it doesn't go from her being in the house at 4:07, closing the door, walking out, to what you had 2 minutes later from a naturally occurring electrical fire in a wall. It doesn't happen.
Another specific detail that he gave us that was important, that there was charring on the inside of the door of the room, but there were none on the outside.
We determined that the door had been closed during the fire. Now, at some point in time, it was opened by my guys when they were fighting the fire.
When I looked over the log, we found out there was entry at 4:02 p.m. of that day, and then there was an exit at 4:07 p.m. LaToya had already told us she went in the house alone within that time span.
You got a Facebook video at 4:09 of the fire already coming out of the home. It was on a 2-minute window there.
No one else could have went in this house but Miss Brownlee to start this fire. Everything's pointing to her.
Even though we had all the evidence that we had, I still wanted to talk to her because I still wanted that confession from her as to why she done what she done.
This is a murder investigation. Somebody lost their life. So as much as we possibly can get from her, if she was willing to talk, is what we were going to continue to get. Fire Marshal Mike Ivy and Detective Johnson were interviewing her. Of course, Mike, he would take the lead.
This is a tragedy. And it's up to us to figure out what happened. And when the investigators looked at the scene yesterday, they determined that somebody purposely set the fire. So where we're at right now is to try to figure out what happened.
When did
Now,
they fire it?
Where?
Yes.
In the bedroom where he was. The problem we've got is somebody set the fire. And we can't find anybody that was in that house other than you.
I didn't set no fire. I wouldn't harm that man. I seen him just like my daddy. And I wouldn't harm him at all. I ain't seen no smoke and no fire in this room at all.
Okay. Did you keep any flammable liquids in the house, like paint thinner, gasoline?
He keep lighter fluid and gasoline out there, but this stuff he can keep out there.
Had you used any of it lately?
No.
Well, I don't know exactly what to tell you, but this is not going to go away.
I don't want it to go away. I want her to find out what happened because an innocent man lost his life. That fire did not start because of me.
After I saw that she wasn't budging, I moved closer because I wanted to establish a rapport with her. And I wanted to see her face. Why not? Just go ahead and lay it all out here. It was worth a shot.
Are you aware that ADT logs down the time that whenever somebody come in and whenever they leave out?
They would?
Are you aware that they log down whenever the door is open?
Yeah.
Are you aware that nobody else entered the house in between 12:30 and 4 o'clock?
And I wasn't aware of it.
And you're correct, you got home around 4.
Mm-hmm.
You went in and, matter of fact, 4:02. Got the door closed behind you. I guess they do it within like a minute time frame. The door closed behind you at 4:03. The door opens at 4:06. They got you leaving out at 4:07.
Okay.
You leave the house at 4:07.
Mm-hmm.
We got a video recorded at 4:09, 4:10 with the house blazed up. I'm talking about flames. I already busted through the window where the old man was laying. There was 2 windows right there. And your phone call that you got on Facebook, that was at 4:11. You showed it to me yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. From 4:07 to 4:11, ain't no way a fire is gonna build up that much pressure in what, 4 minutes to blow one out and then fire already shooting through the roof.
I'm getting fed up about it because it seems like y'all harassing me.
But you're not answering my question. Can you see a fire starting that fast from 4:07 to 4:11?
I don't know about fires, how fast they start or whatever. I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know how fast fires start or whatever. But I know I did not start no fire. I did not kill no innocent person, a handicapped person. I did not do that. And I will say that to the end. I did not do that.
Well, and I'm going to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. We think you did.
When I took him, when I gave him that candy, I was in the room with him. I didn't see no smoke. I didn't see no sign, no smoke, but I smelled smoke. I said, well, we'll get Junior to check it when he get here. He said, okay.
Right. And you closed the door and walked out?
No, I don't close the door. I don't close the door.
You don't close the door?
No.
All right. Now we got another problem.
What?
Because I know he didn't get out the bed and go and close the door.
That door was not closed. If I was the last one there, I know I did not close that door. And I know that he did not get out the bed and walk over and close the door.
So you ought to feel like me, it's a problem somewhere where someone closed that door. And that ought to be something you're concerned about. Who closed the door? You should also be concerned about who was in the house to set this fire. And for it to go that fast, there had to been some kind of accelerant or something poured to make it just blaze that fast. I've been doing this a long time. He been around this a long time. This doesn't happen in 2 minutes.
I just know I didn't do it.
What I'm saying is, forget about the fire being set.
Right.
There was a fire in that room at that time, and you're putting yourself in the room. You're saying, I gave him the candy. I stood by the bed.
There wasn't no fire in the room.
There was.
I didn't see no fire.
There was. There was.
I didn't see that.
There's no way you could have.
I didn't see a fire in the room, and there ain't no way I leave a person right there, handicapped person, see a fire and can't get out.
I mean, that was her story. I felt like she was gonna stick to it. So I got to dealing with just her personal life as far as her and her husband. I figured if I could play on that side of her emotions, that she would maybe get upset and actually like tell me what it was as to the reason why she did it.
But listen to me. I understand what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I understand your husband made you mad. Past month or so, I understand it's a lot going on. It's a lot you're dealing with. It's a lot on you.
Got nothing to do with the situation at hand.
You knew this divorce was coming up. You knew all of this. I understand that.
Me and his situation ain't got nothing to do with this situation at hand. I wouldn't have took no innocent life over my situation.
I understand that you wanted to hurt your husband. I understand that. You wanted to hurt him.
I want to be that.
I understand.
I want to hurt him. I hurt him, not hurt his daddy.
I understand
so
that.
I don't even put that like
You already said you wanted to hurt him before. I understand all of that. But why? Just tell me why. I know.
Okay, well, arrest me.
Tell me why you did it at the trailer and he made you so mad that you wanted to burn the trailer down then. Why? Why did you do it? Just tell me why. That's all I want to know.
When we was at the trailer, I had set that plant on.
It wasn't a plant.
It was a
socket in the wall.
It was a plant right by the socket on the wall.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Don't tell me what I did.
You did it with that socket.
No, I know what I did.
And you did it with this socket.
I know what I did. And I ain't messing with I know. Okay, well, arrest me. I know what I did.
Listen.
And I know I didn't harm no innocent man, crippled man that can't do nothing for themselves. I would never do nothing like that, young or old.
Well, the only thing I can say is what you're saying. This is your last opportunity. If you want to make this right and talk about, there was a fire. Well, forget about being there.
I didn't say no fire. No, don't stop this right here. Because I didn't do none of it.
Let me and him go ahead and speak for a second. We're gonna let you go.
We wanted to arrest her, but that would become risky because then she would probably lawyer up. We were still waiting on the autopsy and the lab report. We wanted to make sure that when it was time to make that arrest, we had everything set in stone to move forward.
All right, Victoria. If you ain't got nothing else to talk to us about, and nothing else you want to tell us, free to go.
Okay.
I really wish you could have cleared it up more. That's the part of it.
It is what it is. That's what happened. So, ain't nothing else I can say about it.
All right.
At the end of that interview, she looked back at us and it was like, dang, y'all still ain't gonna arrest me, and just walked on out like it was nothing. I felt like it was just a waiting game. Like I knew next time I see you, I'ma have you in handcuffs.
There was lighter fluid that was used on the bed, the love seat, and to the wall outlet in the house. We also get the preliminary autopsy report from the medical examiner's office.
Mr. Brownlee died of thermal injuries, meaning he burned to death.
The manner of death was a homicide. Accelerant was poured all over his body as well as in his mouth. And I thought back to my conversation with LaToya about how I gave him a piece of candy.
Then he asked for a piece of candy, and I gave it to him.
There's something about this piece of candy that she claims she gave him that's not registering. And that left me wondering in my mind, okay, something else is going on here. Could it be the lighter fluid that she had put in his mouth?
And he said, I smell some smoke. I said, I smell some too.
It's one thing to burn, but to burn from your mouth and your body like that was just, what I would say is just low down. Exactly the words that her aunt said about her in that interview.
So she is evil, hateful, and low down, all of the above.
She was just this low down individual that'll do anything she had to do to get back at her husband. She didn't put up a fight, didn't argue, didn't fuss. She just put the handcuffs on and got in the car.
Capital murder is a very serious charge in the state of Mississippi. Capital murder means that, you can be sentenced to death. And she was facing that. She was facing those consequences for her actions. We was working hand in hand with the district attorney's office. This case was potentially going to trial, but I still wanted her to go ahead and give the confession. The family deserved it. The family deserved the truth about what happened to their father.
So we do got the camera on.
Okay.
Your name is LaToya Brownlee?
Yes,
correct?
it is.
All right. You understand the charge that you have right
Yes.
now?
Mm-hmm.
What you charged with right now?
Capital.
Capital murder. I know I'm not your lawyer, LaToya. If there's anything that might help you, it's better for you to say it now than to wait on to go to court. But if you get charged with capital murder, and that's the only statute in the state of Mississippi where they will kill you. It might be 5 years after you go to jail, it might be 10, but they will kill you.
Can I talk?
Yeah, you free to talk.
What did I have to gain by killing him? That's what I want to know.
I don't know, you tell me.
That's the reason why my parents got a lawyer. You want to know something about that? About the lawyer? They ain't give me just one. They got me 5 paid lawyers. You feel me? Put that on your recorder.
You can go and get 10 different lawyers, okay? But it don't change facts of a case. And I'm telling you, Toya, I'm telling you, it ain't looking good on your end.
And I would tell you something else regarding that situation, but I'm gonna let it all be a surprise. When I go to court, the world gonna know.
And I'm telling you, you don't want to wait on court to decide to.
Why?
Because at that point, it's gonna be pretty much too late.
No, I'm not.
I'm telling you. What you think can happen? I'm just telling you, Toya, you got a long road to travel. You feel better getting it off your chest. You really, 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 really want to get this off your chest.
Okay, first of all, first and foremost, when I first entered that house, I didn't smell no smoke. That's the first thing. I didn't smell no smoke until he told me to go and get his towel, which was by the chair, by the window. That's when I noticed some smoke. And then I went and checked the stove. I came back, it wasn't no smoke back there. It was over by his window. So whatever started, it was on the outside of that house. It wasn't nothing in that house burning.
You never told us about a fire or smoke outside of the window, but here we are now.
Why you just not telling me about this window?
I said that before. Well, I thought I did. If I knew who did this, I would say who did it. I'm not gonna go down for somebody, you know what I'm saying? I don't have no idea. I went and checked the kitchen, my bedroom, kids' bedroom, the bathroom, nothing. You think I pour some damn gas on this man? I'd be a crazy damn fool to do some stuff like that. And furthermore, this man ain't never did nothing to me for me to take his life.
Toya, I wish you the best outcome. Life itself is too short You might not tell me today. You might not tell me when it comes around to your court date. And I might be old and gray by the time you decide to tell what really happened that day. But like I told you, whether you got one lawyer or 5 lawyers, he don't change facts of the case. Okay?
Like I said, I didn't commit this crime, so I already know. I'm not finna go down for something I didn't do. One thing about it, God done already showed me. I'm lying up with God. He done already showed me. I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna walk. Cause when I get through pleading my case, I'm gonna walk. Believe it.
And you said you're a Christian, so I believe I can go there. God always forgive you. Or you can keep living in denial. That's between you and God. But I can tell you, on that day, when you go to court, I hope God is with you that day. Because it ain't going to work out the way you think it's going to work out.
We gave her so many chances to go ahead and present the facts. But then she went back to the snoring. And so after the final interview with her, and we were prepared to go to court with her and the 5 lawyers that she had. I remember when the judge, he asked her, why are you pleading guilty? And she finally said, because I did it. It wasn't a confession we dreamed of, but we got our confession. And it took going in front of the judge for her to finally admit what she had did. And that was the confession that we were wanting.
I feel like her motive was to get back at her husband. And she done that by taking his dad from him.
It was such a hard situation that affected so many different people. So many different lives were changed behind this.
He was a great guy. He was a church-going man and a great family man. So that's how the city of West Point can remember Mr. William Brownlee Sr.
The night was colder than usual in Manhattan, 2001, a biting wind slicing down the narrow streets, as if the city itself wanted to warn someone, or something. A single streetlight flickered over the corner of 54th and 7th Avenue, casting elongated shadows across the asphalt, shadows that seemed to crawl toward the brick buildings, whispering secrets that no one dared hear. It was there, behind a graffiti-stained dumpster, that she was found, not in the alleys of Queens, not in the quiet parks uptown, but here in the heart of the city that never sleeps, where millions pass by every day, oblivious. Her eyes, wide and frozen in terror, reflected the harsh glow of the flickering light, a snapshot of fear that would haunt the precinct for decades. She was young, barely 23, a local waitress with dreams too big for her small apartment, too bright for the dark streets that held her final moments. The police arrived in minutes, but minutes were too late, and the streets smelled of damp concrete and something fouler, a hint of perfume twisted into something sinister. The community was shocked, gossip running faster than the subways, each whisper more lurid than the last, each theory more impossible than the next. Cold case already, though the term had not yet been coined in the collective fear that gripped that neighborhood, because even the first responders felt it. This was different. This was not a mugging gone wrong, not a robbery with bullets ricocheting off brick walls. This was personal, deliberate, and it left a scar that the city itself could feel. Detective Michael Hargrove had been on the force for 15 years, seen enough blood and lies to numb most men, but nothing prepared him for the tableau that night. He crouched by the body, careful not to disturb evidence invisible to the untrained eye. The victim's hands were clean, nails perfectly manicured, but there was a bruise, faint but deliberate, around her wrist, as if someone wanted her to resist, to fight, to scream. Yet there was no witness, no camera, not even a shadow that didn't belong to the city itself. Hargrove scribbled notes into a leather-bound notebook, knowing that every detail mattered, that every shadow could be a clue. The wind shifted, carrying the distant hum of a taxi, the echo of hurried footsteps, and the faint metallic scent that would later be analyzed in labs and scrutinized under microscopes. Nothing obvious, nothing overt, only subtle, the kind of hint that demanded obsession. He memorized the curve of her hair, the angle of her neck, the way the streetlight caught the shimmer of her jacket. And as the night stretched, filling the air with sirens and whispered speculation, the city felt a pause, as if holding its breath for the story that would not yet be told. Weeks turned into months, and the case went cold. Every lead dissolved into shadows. Witnesses retracted statements, their memories hazy, colored by fear or by the passage of time. Surveillance cameras in 2001 were crude, grainy blobs that offered no faces, no plates, no direction. Friends of the victim were questioned, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, each retelling their own version of her last night, but none led anywhere. Hargrove and his partner, Detective Lillian Cruz, mapped every step, traced every acquaintance, every strange phone call, every fleeting interaction that could have altered the course of that evening. The victim's apartment was pristine, except for a single coffee cup on the counter, lipstick smudged, cold to the touch, a silent witness to something, anything. Her diary was missing. Her phone records were incomplete. There was a sense that someone meticulous, had erased her existence before leaving her body to the indifferent city. It was a riddle wrapped in the asphalt, a whisper in the hum of neon, a cold case that would fester in the precinct like an unhealed wound. The city moved on, or at least pretended to. Tourists flooded Times Square, ignoring the shadows that lurked around alleys. Street vendors shouted over each other, peddling hot dogs and pretzels while Hargrove and Cruz walked the same streets, retracing steps, questioning faces now grown older, now changed. Sometimes they found fragments. A taxi driver remembered picking up a young woman, alone, hurried, checking a watch. A janitor recalled a figure lurking near the dumpster. Nothing remarkable at the time. Clues evaporated before they could solidify into evidence. Years became a blur of files, cold leads, phone calls unanswered, promises made to grieving parents that fell into the abyss of bureaucracy. Every birthday of the victim was a reminder. Every anniversary a dagger of guilt for the detectives who could not stop the clock, who could not prevent the fear from crystallizing in the community, a fear that deepened with every headline about another unsolved crime. Her story became a whisper, her face a fading photograph pinned to a bulletin board behind Hargrove's desk, a face that refused to vanish entirely, despite the city's attempt to forget. Then came the anomalies, the tiny glitches that only obsession notices. A name resurfacing in court files, an arrest elsewhere, a fingerprint that didn't match, a witness claiming to have seen a suspicious car parked nearby, black, unmarked with tinted windows, disappearing the night she died. Hargrove pored over microfiche, combed through paper trails, scanned negatives, listened to recorded interviews over and over. Cruz tracked every phone record again, this time cross-referencing with dates, times, locations that seemed meaningless until patterns emerged, barely visible, like constellations in a polluted sky. A man's voice on a 911 call, muffled but distinctive, kept resurfacing in the periphery of memory, calling for help, or perhaps pretending to, a ghost in the data, teasing, taunting, hiding the truth in plain sight. Each year added weight, the weight of unsolved questions, the weight of a family waiting, a city shrugging, and two detectives refusing to let the darkness claim the story entirely. Cold case boards were filled with sticky notes, photographs, timelines, everything layered in color, chaos disguised as order. Friends and family tried to push forward, but the shadow of 2001 clung to them. The victim's younger brother took to writing letters to the mayor, to the police, to anyone who would listen, describing her laughter, her dreams, her favorite diner on 9th Street. He sent photographs with margins scribbled with memories. He became a shadow of her joy, carrying the weight of unanswered questions through years of holidays, anniversaries, quiet nights, haunted by the sound of a key turning in a lock that would never open. Hargrove watched him from a distance, feeling a kinship, the kind that only shared loss can forge, the kind that fuels obsession into action. They were all tethered to that night, to that corner of 54th and 7th, to the flickering streetlight that seemed to mark a boundary between life and the unanswered, the known and the unknowable. The breakthrough began not with a bang, but with a whisper. DNA technology, once nascent, had evolved. Labs could now detect what was previously invisible, reconstruct what had been erased. A match appeared in a database, inconclusive at first, then more compelling, linking evidence from that night to a man with a history of minor offenses, nothing that screamed danger, nothing that suggested he could be capable of the meticulous, cold cruelty required to commit this act. Hargrove felt the familiar tension, the combination of hope and disbelief, the knowledge that decades of waiting could collapse in a single discovery. Every step forward was cautious, deliberate. Each phone call, each subpoena a step into the unknown, balancing anticipation with the haunting possibility that even this lead might evaporate like all the rest. Witnesses were re-interviewed, handwriting analyzed, footprints compared. Crews coordinated surveillance footage from nearby businesses, stores that had long since closed, security tapes recovered from archives, peeling at the edges, frames missing, static crackling. Every tiny anomaly mattered. A neighbor remembered a late-night argument, muffled voices carried across walls. A cab driver finally recalled picking up a man who matched the description reconstructed from minor witness reports, a man who had never before appeared on any radar. The pieces began to align, a mosaic forming from decades of scattered, seemingly unrelated fragments. Each night, Hargrove returned home exhausted, haunted by echoes of the victim's fear, replaying the last moments of her life in his mind, imagining how it could have happened, where he had failed, what could have been done differently. Sleep was fleeting, moments snatched in brief intervals between nightmares and phone calls, the city outside continuing its relentless pulse, indifferent to a single life reclaimed in memory. The investigation intensified quietly at first, then with the urgency of inevitability. Letters of subpoena, court orders, the silent coordination between precincts, all moving like gears in a machine long dormant. And then the arrest was made. The man, calm but with a flicker of recognition in his eyes, was led from his apartment in Queens. The streets buzzed with activity, reporters gathering, neighbors peeking from behind curtains, the city sensing the culmination of a story 22 years in the making. Hargrove and Cruz observed from a distance, feeling an odd mixture of relief and a lingering emptiness of years lost. The suspect's expression was unreadable, but the city had waited long enough to see the shadow of justice descend, however belatedly. And yet, despite the arrest, the questions remained, gnawing like a persistent echo. Why her? Why that night? Why here? Answers came in fragments, each revelation a spark, illuminating some corners while leaving others in the same impenetrable darkness that had haunted every step of the investigation. The city's pulse did not slow. Even as the handcuffs clicked, even as the suspect was led down the steps of his building, a man once invisible, now cast in the harsh glow of public scrutiny. The neighborhood had long since forgotten the quiet despair of 2001, replaced by trendy cafes and neon lights. But for those who remembered, the arrest was a shockwave, sending tremors through memories that had lain dormant, collecting dust and regret. Detective Hargrove could almost hear the echoes of that night, the way the wind had carried whispers through empty streets, the sound of hurried footsteps dissolving into nothingness, a presence that had slipped through the cracks of the city's constant motion. Cruz noted the subtle changes in the suspect's demeanor, the way his eyes flicked toward the familiar corners of Manhattan, a silent acknowledgement that he knew the terrain intimately, that the city itself had been complicit, or at least indifferent, in hiding him for decades. The air was thick with anticipation, reporters jostling for position, cameras flashing, questions shouted into the wind, but the detectives barely noticed, their focus tunneled on the truth, on the fragments that could finally tell the story in full. For 22 years, evidence had sat untouched, files stacked in the corner of a precinct room where time moved slower than outside, where dust accumulated like memories, and yet, somehow, the smallest anomaly, the faint fingerprint, the minuscule hair strand, a mismatched fiber, had persisted, waiting for technology to catch up to human obsession. The lab analysts who re-examined the evidence spoke in hushed tones, awed by the clarity of what had been overlooked. DNA, once a concept relegated to theory, now became a language in which the city's secrets were spoken, a revelation that defied decades of silence. Hargrove traced each sample with gloved fingers, imagining the events of that night, reconstructing motions, gestures, the subtle cruelty that could exist in a glance, a shove, a whisper. He thought of the victim, her life interrupted mid-sentence, her laughter frozen in time, and he felt the urgency, the crushing weight of responsibility that only those tethered to such cases could comprehend. It was as if the city itself demanded justice, demanding that the darkness be dissected, examined, and understood, even when comprehension seemed impossible. The suspect had lived among the city's millions, unnoticed, blending into the chaos, perhaps even confident that the world had moved on, that the shadows had claimed their due. But obsession is a hunter that never tires, and Hargrove had never stopped chasing, never ceased mapping the invisible patterns of a life destroyed. Crews dug deeper into the suspect's past, uncovering connections that were almost imperceptible, ties to fleeting acquaintances, vague addresses, menial employment that brought him into the same corridors, the same subway stations, the same streets as the victim. A pattern emerged, subtle, almost laughably ordinary to anyone not trained to see, but to the detectives, it was undeniable. A tapestry of coincidences that the suspect had relied upon, each thread carefully chosen, yet leaving microscopic traces, the ghosts of his movements for those who knew how to read them. Witnesses were interviewed again, older, slower to remember, their recollections fragmented, but with patience that had been honed over decades. The detectives pieced together timelines that aligned, revealing gaps, shadows that could no longer hide. Community response was mixed. Some neighbors, unaware of the full scope, expressed relief tinged with the chilling acknowledgement that the monster had lived among them for years, invisible yet omnipresent. Others recoiled at the reality, questioning how such meticulous crime could evade justice for so long, how a life could be snatched and left dangling in obscurity while the city carried on, indifferent. Hargrove walked the streets, tracing the victim's last known steps, feeling the familiar hum of the city beneath his feet, the distant wail of sirens, the honk of impatient drivers. Each sound a reminder that life continues, indifferent, relentless, even as shadows linger. He thought of the victim's family, the brother who had aged, who had carried grief as a second skin, who had lived with the unanswered and felt a pang of guilt that he, too, had waited so long, but also a surge of hope, fragile yet unyielding, that justice, however delayed, was finally taking shape. The interrogation room was stark, fluorescent lights harsh against the suspect's face. He was calm, too calm, or perhaps the calm of a man who had rehearsed this for years in the quiet chambers of his mind. Hargrove and Cruz entered, their footsteps echoing against tile, their presence a reminder of inevitability. The suspect's eyes flicked to the clock, to the tape recorder, to the notes that would eventually become a record of his unraveling. Questions were precise, measured, each word a probe into the void, each pause a calculated opportunity to observe micro-expressions, subtle tics, the twitch of a jaw, the blink that betrayed anxiety. He denied, of course, denied with a conviction that could have fooled the untrained, denied with a calmness that chilled, but the forensic threads wove a net too intricate to escape. Fiber from the victim's jacket matched his clothing. DNA traces linked him conclusively. And yet, there was more, always more, a psychological profile that suggested motive, obsession, a dark fascination with control and fear, carefully hidden beneath the veneer of normalcy. The city's press descended in waves. Headlines screamed with urgency, echoing the decades-long silence. Suspect arrested after 22 years. Manhattan cold case closed. Decades-old mystery solved. The words were bold, visceral, intended to grab attention. But for Hargrove and Cruz, the headlines were only the beginning. They knew the story would never be neat, never fully digestible. There were no heroic moments, no cathartic revelations, only fragments of truth that could be stitched together to approximate understanding. The victim's family watched in muted shock, their reactions complex, a mixture of relief and grief, a bitter taste lingering as they confronted the reality that years of waiting had not brought her back, had not restored what was lost, only offered closure of a different, more painful kind. Hargrove felt the weight of history pressing down, decades of investigation, frustration, false leads, every small victory and every crushing defeat, culminating in this moment that was both resolution and reminder of all that time had stolen. Neighbors remembered small details, seemingly insignificant in 2001, but now magnified through the lens of hindsight. The sound of a car engine idling late at night, a shadow passing the alley, a figure standing just out of view. These fragments became crucial pieces, woven together with the evidence collected, the DNA, the fingerprints, the subtle psychological profile that revealed the suspect's meticulous planning. He had watched her, perhaps followed her, perhaps known her routines better than anyone, the intimacy of observation turning banal acts into terrifying inevitability. The city that had slept, that had continued in ignorance, now awakened to the quiet horror that had existed among its neon glow and incessant hum. Hargrove felt a grim satisfaction, a professional achievement intertwined with human sorrow, aware that for every piece of justice delivered, the echoes of trauma would linger, resonating through years, decades, sometimes a lifetime. As the suspect awaited trial, the precinct felt the residual tension, the echoes of unresolved questions, the sense that even in resolution, a shadow remained. The investigation files, once gathering dust, became a record, a testament to persistence, to obsession, to the refusal to let darkness go unchallenged. Hargrove and Cruz reviewed every note, every photograph, every witness statement one last time before archiving, knowing that the cold case board, now empty of this particular tragedy, would soon be filled with the next puzzle, the next story, the next shadow of fear waiting for light. The community, having absorbed the shock, began to heal, cautiously, slowly, each person grappling with their own mixture of relief and lingering unease, aware that the city's rhythm continued indifferent to human grief, yet subtly shaped by it. Each alley, each street corner carrying memory in ways only the observant could perceive. The detectives' minds, however, remained anchored to that night in 2001, to the cold wind on 54th and 7th, to the flickering streetlight, to the silent witness of a dumpster under which terror had paused for a brief, eternal moment. They replayed the timeline endlessly, scrutinizing every missed opportunity, every fleeting chance to intervene, every microscopic clue that had been overlooked, now magnified by hindsight. The arrest, while monumental, did not erase the past. The victim's absence remained palpable, a haunting presence in the precinct hallways, in the neighborhood that had aged around it, in the hearts of those who had known her, and in the collective conscience of detectives who had dedicated years, sometimes decades, to chasing shadows in the pursuit of justice. Every resolved cold case carried a weight of memory, a reminder that even when the law catches up, life cannot rewind. And yet, for the first time in 22 years, the city could finally whisper the victim's name aloud, unafraid, acknowledging that her story, though marred by tragedy, had been honored, pursued, and finally, partially understood. The city never truly sleeps, and neither did the echoes of that night. Even with the arrest made, the streets whispered stories in corners where sunlight barely reached and shadows seemed longer, heavier, as if they remembered the fear that had passed through them. Hargrove walked the precinct halls, eyes scanning case files, each folder a frozen heartbeat, each photograph a frozen scream. He could still see her face, wide-eyed, frozen, a snapshot of terror that refused to fade, a constant reminder of why the work never ends. Cruz joined him, notebooks in hand, annotations running like veins across the pages, connecting names, times, and locations that at first glance seemed random, but now revealed patterns too precise to ignore. They discussed minutiae that outsiders would dismiss. The trajectory of a single footprint, the angle of a bruise, the barely visible fibers that spoke volumes about what had transpired. Every detail was a thread leading through the labyrinth of a life taken too soon, a thread that, when followed, led them deeper into the psyche of a man who had managed to disappear in plain sight for 22 years. The victim's apartment had long been emptied, sold to new tenants unaware of the history that had unfolded within its walls. Yet for Hargrove, the memories remained tangible, etched into the peeling paint and the lingering scent of coffee and lipstick. He remembered the diary that had never been found, the small, personal items that disappeared without a trace, and wondered if they had been removed deliberately by someone who wanted the story buried. Cruz had theorized as much, noting the precision of the erasures, the subtle avoidance of detection, the almost surgical efficiency with which her life had been obscured. They speculated endlessly, not because the evidence demanded it, but because understanding motive required imagining the unthinkable, and imagination was both a tool and a curse in cases like this. Who watches? Who waits? Who decides to erase a life like a line drawn through chalk on a blackboard? The answer remained elusive, hidden behind layers of time, until the technology finally caught up to human tenacity. Outside, the city continued to pulse. Horns blared, subway trains rattled beneath streets, pedestrians passed in waves, oblivious to the quiet storm of revelation occurring blocks away. Witnesses who had previously been silent now spoke with caution, careful not to implicate themselves, careful to navigate the delicate balance between memory and fear. A cab driver remembered again, a fleeting detail overlooked in 2001. The man had hummed a tune, a common melody, yet the driver swore it was deliberate, calculated, a form of control, a psychological signature. Hargrove noted it meticulously, recognizing that even the smallest behavior could be crucial when reconstructing events that had long vanished into obscurity. Cruz cross-referenced the cab route with known locations of the suspect, aligning it with footprints, fiber evidence, and faint surveillance stills that were barely intelligible but contained patterns invisible to casual observers. The city itself became a character in the investigation, an indifferent yet necessary participant, its streets, buildings, and hidden corners providing context, motive, and sometimes inadvertent clues. The suspect remained unervingly composed in custody, yet Hargrove detected small fissures in his calm facade. A twitch here, a hesitation there, the almost imperceptible shift in breathing when confronted with the DNA evidence. Cruz observed, noting patterns, timing, and reactions, cataloging behavior that would later become central to understanding not just what happened, but why. The interrogation became a delicate dance. Questions phrased carefully, pauses measured, silences used as tools. They could not rush, for the suspect had survived on patience, on calculated delays, and any misstep could erase months of progress. The detectives were patient too, honed by decades of dealing with shadows, aware that every answer extracted could open the door to deeper, darker truths. And while evidence was piling up in undeniable layers, understanding the mind behind the crime required a different kind of evidence, one intangible, psychological, built from observation and inference, yet no less critical than DNA or fingerprints. Community reaction was a volatile mix of relief and lingering terror. Neighborhood meetings convened to discuss safety, to commemorate a life taken, to address fears that had quietly permeated the streets for over 2 decades. Friends of the victim, now older, some married, some with children, spoke of the void left in their lives, the birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays marked by the absence of laughter and companionship. Their voices carried grief, anger, and disbelief, intertwining in a chorus of human emotion that was both cathartic and devastating. Hargrove attended some meetings silently, observing, listening. He felt their pain as acutely as his own professional obsession, knowing that no arrest could truly restore what was lost, that closure was a bitter concept, partial at best, and yet necessary for the living to continue. Each story shared, each memory recalled, each tear shed became a mosaic of a life erased, a portrait of absence, and a reminder of why the case had mattered so deeply. In the lab, analysts worked tirelessly to confirm every piece of evidence, cross-referencing databases, reanalyzing samples with technologies unavailable in 2001. Each new confirmation tightened the net around the suspect, reducing ambiguity, reinforcing the narrative constructed painstakingly over years. Fiber evidence linked him to multiple locations. DNA confirmed proximity, and subtle chemical residues told a story of movement, presence, and intent. Crews compiled reports, charts, and timelines, a visual representation of decades of investigation, transforming chaos into a coherent, though chilling, map of crime. Each day brought new revelations, not only confirming the past, but illuminating the meticulous preparation, the cold precision, the almost ritualistic method by which the suspect had executed the crime. Understanding became an obsessive endeavor, a way to reconcile the incomprehensible with facts, numbers, and human behavior. Yet even as the truth emerged, a shadow of uncertainty persisted, a reminder that full comprehension of human darkness is always just out of reach. The media coverage intensified, framing the narrative with sensational headlines and dramatic imagery. Photographs of the suspect, arresting officers, and crime scene illustrations filled papers and websites. The city's collective memory was reignited, forcing residents to reconcile past fear with present reality. Families of other victims followed closely, seeking reassurance that long-dormant cases could still be resolved. Advocacy groups hailed the breakthrough as a testament to perseverance, dedication, and the evolution of forensic science, while skeptics questioned the delay, the bureaucracy, and the societal structures that had allowed a predator to remain free for decades. Hargrove, Crews, and their teams became, in a sense, the silent heroes. Their meticulous work behind the scenes contrasted against the sensationalized headlines, a reminder that the machinery of justice is slow, intricate, and relentless, often overshadowed by the glare of public attention. Meanwhile, the suspect's past continued to unravel under scrutiny. Employment records, rental agreements, social connections, and even casual acquaintances were re-examined. Each detail offered insight into patterns of control, manipulation, and careful concealment. Hargrove noted subtle consistencies, a preference for isolated streets, familiarity with timing of public transport, behavioral patterns aligned with surveillance gaps. Crews tracked contacts, relationships that appeared innocuous but, in retrospect, were critical to understanding how the suspect had evaded detection. The investigation had become as much about psychology as it was about forensics, each element interwoven to create a complete picture of the man and the meticulous orchestration of the crime that had gone unnoticed for 22 years. It was a portrait of deception, patience, and cold calculation, a testament to both human cunning and human persistence. The trial preparations began in earnest. Evidence was cataloged, witness statements solidified, timelines reconstructed, and exhibits prepared. Hargrove and Crews meticulously reviewed every detail, anticipating defense strategies, potential challenges, and public scrutiny. Mock interrogations, psychological assessments, and forensic simulations became tools to ensure the narrative was airtight, that the truth could be conveyed compellingly and incontrovertibly. The detectives were acutely aware that public perception would play a role, that media narratives could shape the collective understanding of justice. Every presentation, every cross-examination, every slide and photograph was scrutinized, a high-stakes performance designed to honor the victim, respect the evidence, and hold the suspect accountable. The weight of decades pressed upon them. It fueled their precision, sharpened their focus, and deepened their commitment to revealing the full story. Even as legal proceedings loomed, the city carried on around them. Sidewalks teemed with life. Neon lights flickered against rain-slicked streets, and the distant wail of sirens reminded all that crime never rests. Hargrove and Cruz walked the streets where the victim had last lived, last laughed, last existed in the corporeal world. Each step was both familiar and surreal, a traversal through time, memory, and consequence. They reflected on the fragility of life, the relentless passage of years, and the resilience required to pursue justice against the odds. Every shadow, every flickering light, every unnoticed corner of Manhattan held memories of that night, of the investigation, of the human lives touched, scarred, and ultimately compelled toward some semblance of closure. And though the suspect now faced the full weight of the law, the city itself bore the lingering imprint of tragedy, an invisible scar etched into its streets, its rhythms, its collective memory. Even with the arrest secured, the city seemed to resist closure, as if the buildings themselves remembered the fear that had once passed through them. Hargrove returned nightly to 54th and 7th, retracing the victim's final steps, walking under the flickering streetlight that had once captured her frozen gaze. He imagined the wind slicing through the alleys, carrying distant footsteps, whispers of someone unseen, someone who had vanished into the crowd, leaving behind only fear and unanswered questions. Cruz accompanied him sometimes, notebooks brimming with annotations, timelines, and cross-reference sightings, each detail a thread binding the past to the present. They spoke little, aware that silence often carries more weight than words in the study of absence. Every shadow seemed deliberate, every faint noise a clue, every reflection in a shop window a potential witness to a life interrupted, a story paused mid-sentence, waiting for recognition. Inside the precinct, evidence was being digitized, files scanned, photographs archived, witness statements typed, analyzed, cross-checked, and filed into digital matrices that could reveal patterns invisible to the human eye. Hargrove marveled at how technology had transformed investigation, turning decades-old fragments into legible narratives, and yet he knew the human element, the intuition, the obsessive patience, the relentless questioning, remained irreplaceable. The suspect's lifestyle, once mundane and easily overlooked, was being dissected meticulously. Employment records, rental agreements, travel itineraries, social connections, all aligned to form a pattern of deliberate invisibility. Cruz noted behavioral consistencies, the choice of routes, the timing of mundane errands, the careful avoidance of known surveillance, the subtle manipulation of social circles. It was a chilling portrait, a life spent in the shadows, a predator refined by decades of practice, invisible yet omnipresent, lurking behind the ordinary, waiting for a chance to strike. Meanwhile, the victim's family struggled with the collision of relief and grief. Birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays have been marked by absence, and even now, with justice pending, the void remained palpable. Letters to detectives, whispered memories shared in therapy sessions, photographs pinned to walls, all served as a testament to lives interrupted, a haunting reminder that no trial could truly restore what was lost. Hargrove understood this intimately, having carried the case for more than 2 decades, replaying the night endlessly in his mind, analyzing every missed opportunity, every overlooked witness, every subtle clue that had eluded detection. He felt a responsibility not only to solve the crime, but to honor the life that had been taken, a burden that weighed on his sleep, his waking hours, his thoughts, never letting him fully rest. The city moved on around him, indifferent, yet he remained tethered to the shadows of 2001, navigating streets that had aged, buildings that had changed, and memories that refused to fade. The forensic team's work intensified. Fibers, hairs, DNA samples, trace residues, all re-examined with technologies that had not existed 2 decades prior. Every microscopic piece of evidence was analyzed, compared, cataloged, and verified, each fragment a step closer to a comprehensive understanding. The suspect's fingerprints, previously overlooked, were matched with precision. Fibers from his clothing aligned with remnants found on the victim. Chemical traces suggested meticulous planning, a consciousness of leaving minimal evidence, yet not an absence of carelessness entirely. Crews tracked subtle patterns in communication, cross-referencing with known movements, noting times and locations that overlapped with the victim's last hours. Slowly, a timeline emerged, precise and chilling, a testament to both human cunning and human persistence, and to the decades of dedication that had finally brought clarity to chaos. The suspect's calm demeanor began to fray under interrogation. Minute shifts in posture, micro-expressions, and fleeting hesitation betrayed a crack in the facade. Hargrove and Cruz observed, cataloging behavior, connecting psychological cues with forensic evidence, forming a profile as vivid as the crime itself. The man had lived for years blending into the city, exploiting its indifference, but under scrutiny, his constructed persona faltered. Questions were measured, deliberate, probing into areas where DNA and fiber could not reach, into the realms of intent, motive, and obsession. Each answer revealed more than the words themselves, a testament to the detective's understanding of human behavior, the ability to read the subtle language of guilt, fear, and control. Every session became a game of patience, observation, and psychological endurance, testing the boundaries of truth, deception, and the human capacity for concealment. Community awareness grew, the shadow of 2001 resurfacing in conversations, in quiet coffee shops, in hushed phone calls. Residents shared memories, details once forgotten, anecdotes that seemed trivial but gained significance under the light of new evidence. A man recalled a figure loitering near a bus stop late at night. Another remembered a parked car with tinted windows, both incidents overlooked at the time but now woven into the broader narrative. Hargrove and Cruz integrated these testimonies into timelines, aligning them with forensic data, recognizing the subtle consistency of behavior over years, decades even. The city became a living archive, its inhabitants unwitting participants in a crime that had left indelible marks, their memories and observations now tools of revelation. The detectives navigated this complex web, balancing empathy with professional rigor, aware that every recollection carried both truth and distortion, yet necessary for reconstructing the past. Legal preparations advanced. Exhibits were compiled, witness statements formalized, and timelines meticulously cross-verified. Hargrove and Cruz reviewed each piece of evidence repeatedly, anticipating defense challenges, potential inconsistencies, and public scrutiny. Every detail mattered. The alignment of fiber evidence, the precision of DNA matches, the corroboration of witness recollections. They rehearsed courtroom presentations, ensuring that the narrative was coherent, compelling, and incontrovertible. The detectives recognized that justice would not only be measured by conviction, but also by the clarity and integrity of how the story was presented. The weight of decades pressed upon them, each step a culmination of years of work, frustration, and meticulous observation. They were acutely aware that while evidence could compel legal judgment, understanding human motive, psychological manipulation, and the deliberate cruelty involved required a depth of insight that transcended mere facts. The city's media intensified coverage, sensationalizing aspects of the arrest, while simultaneously documenting the painstakingly reconstructed investigation. Headlines screamed with urgency. Decades-old cold case unraveled. Suspect arrested in 2001 Manhattan murder. Justice after 22 years. Hargrove observed from the precinct, detached yet internally affected, recognizing that public narratives often simplified complexities, glossed over subtlety, and ignored the meticulous nature of long-term investigation. Cruz noted the selective attention of reporters, the focus on dramatic revelations rather than the slow accumulation of evidence and careful psychological profiling that had made the arrest possible. Yet the coverage also served a purpose, reminding the community that vigilance, persistence, and a relentless pursuit of truth could indeed culminate in resolution, even after decades of uncertainty. Witnesses were re-interviewed in preparation for trial, old memories revisited, timelines reinforced, and potential ambiguities clarified. The detectives worked tirelessly to reconcile fading recollections with physical evidence, creating a cohesive, credible narrative. Every detail, no matter how minor, became a potential pivot in courtroom proceedings. The victim's family was briefed extensively, preparing them for the emotional toll of trial, the confrontation with the past, and the necessity of presenting testimony with both clarity and authenticity. Hargrove and Cruz recognized that the human element, emotion, memory, perception, was as critical to the case as any forensic result. The interplay of these elements would determine not only the success of prosecution, but the preservation of the victim's story in its most truthful form. Even as preparations continued, Hargrove and Cruz reflected on the passage of time. 22 years had altered the city, the streets, the neighborhoods, and the people within them. Buildings had been replaced, businesses had changed hands, residents had come and gone, yet the echoes of 2001 remained. The crime, once hidden in plain sight, now occupied a permanent space in collective memory, a testament to loss, endurance, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The detective's obsession with detail, pattern, and human behavior had transformed fragments of a cold case into a coherent narrative, exposing both the brutality of the crime and the resilience of those committed to uncovering truth. Each revelation, each corroborated detail, each psychological insight was a step closer to finality, a step toward acknowledging a life that had been brutally interrupted and toward restoring some semblance of balance to a world that had briefly tilted into chaos. As the trial date approached, the precinct felt a tension both palpable and subtle. Files were reviewed again, evidence double-checked, witness availability confirmed, and the psychological preparation for courtroom proceedings meticulously undertaken. Hargrove walked the streets surrounding the precinct, observing the city in its chaotic rhythm, noting the interplay of shadow and light, the invisible histories carried by bricks and asphalt, and the faint resonance of a tragedy that had remained dormant, yet ever present for decades. Cruz joined him periodically, their conversation sparse but focused, reflecting on patterns, behavioral consistencies, and procedural nuances that might influence proceedings. Every step, every decision, every preparation was imbued with the gravity of decades of investigation, the weight of memory, and the responsibility of ensuring that justice would be served, not only legally, but with acknowledgement of the profound human loss at the center of the case. The morning of the trial arrived like a storm, heavy and inescapable, pressing down on the city with the weight of anticipation and dread. Courthouse doors groaned as reporters and spectators squeezed into the corridors, cameras clicking, microphones thrust forward, each lens hungry for a fragment of revelation. Hargrove and Cruz arrived early, their expressions guarded, faces etched with years of relentless pursuit, decades of unanswered questions finally converging in one singular, unavoidable moment. The suspect sat across the hall, composed yet taut, his fingers tapping a subtle rhythm on the table, betraying a nervous energy that he attempted to mask. Every eye was upon him, yet most failed to see the careful choreography of years that had brought him here, the meticulous steps of concealment, the patience, the cold calculation that had allowed him to remain invisible to the city, to law enforcement, to time itself. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric, a mixture of tension, anticipation, and the fragile hope of closure. Hargrove watched as the victim's family entered, their faces lined with grief, resilience, and the quiet strength that only decades of waiting can cultivate. They took their seats, hands clasped tightly, whispering fragments of memory to one another, details of laughter, favorite cafes, late-night walks, a perfume that lingered in the air, a coat hung carelessly on a chair. These memories, vivid yet painful, were now part of a narrative that would be laid bare for scrutiny, dissected in front of a judge, jury, and an audience that had followed the story with fascination and horror. Cruz adjusted notes, timelines spread across the table, photographs lined up, evidence prepared meticulously to ensure that every fragment, every witness, every forensic detail could withstand the rigors of legal examination and public interrogation. The prosecution began with deliberate precision, outlining the case in clear, uncompromising language. DNA evidence, painstakingly collected and preserved for over 2 decades, was presented with graphical illustrations, matching fibers, hair strands, and minute traces to the suspect beyond reasonable doubt. Witness statements, both contemporary and revisited, were recounted, each anecdote forming a bridge between memory and fact. The defense, aware of the gravity and the weight of corroborated evidence, attempted to sow doubt, highlighting the passage of time, the potential for misremembered events, and the limitations inherent in forensic reconstruction. Hargrove observed closely, noting every subtle reaction, every flicker of expression, every hesitation that hinted at truth or deception. The courtroom itself becoming an extension of the investigation, a controlled stage where decades of pursuit would be tested under the scrutiny of law and human perception. Outside the courthouse, the community gathered in clusters, sharing memories, speculating, reacting to every passing detail. Old neighbors, once peripheral witnesses, now felt a resurgence of relevance, their recollections suddenly critical in reconstructing a narrative long obscured by time. They spoke of fleeting shadows, of cars parked too long, of footsteps echoing too late into the night. These fragments, once dismissed as trivial, were now vital in confirming timelines and behavioral patterns, their significance magnified by the precision of modern forensic science. Hargrove and Cruz monitored these interactions quietly, recognizing that human memory, while flawed when aligned with physical evidence, can create a cohesive, compelling story, one that withstands both temporal erosion and psychological manipulation. In the interrogation rooms that had once held the suspect, the memories of endless questioning resurfaced, the repetition of questions, the analysis of microexpressions, the careful observation of tone, posture, and cadence. Every session had been a battle of patience, a psychological chess game where the suspect attempted to maintain control, conceal intent, and exploit gaps in perception. Now, in the courtroom, those same observations were distilled into testimony, reports, and expert analysis, transforming years of behind-the-scenes labor into visible, compelling narrative. The detectives understood that while physical evidence can prove presence in action, the understanding of motive, pattern, and psychological manipulation required both meticulous documentation and interpretive insight, a skill honed over decades of confronting human darkness. The trial moved forward, witness by witness, piece by piece, constructing a mosaic of events, behavior, and consequence. Each detail was scrutinized, cross-examined, challenged, yet the overarching narrative held firm, bolstered by technology, corroborated testimony, and the inexorable logic of accumulated evidence. Hargrove observed the reactions of the suspect, noting subtle tics, shifts in gaze, fleeting expressions of tension or recognition, each one recorded mentally, cataloged for later analysis. Cruz monitored the jury, noting their engagement, their reactions to testimony, their silent processing of decades of unresolved mystery now rendered tangible, observable, and accountable. The courtroom became a theater of memory, forensic science, and human emotion, where every word, gesture, and artifact contributed to an intricate tapestry of truth that had been decades in the making. Outside, the city's rhythm continued, indifferent yet ever-present, a reminder that life carries on even in the shadow of revelation. Pedestrians moved past newsstands displaying dramatic headlines. Subway trains rattled beneath the streets, and the hum of daily life persisted, a constant counterpoint to the intensity unfolding within the courthouse walls. Hargrove felt the duality keenly. The personal intensity of decades-long obsession juxtaposed against the relentless, indifferent pulse of a metropolis that never pauses, never yields, and never forgets completely. Cruz, beside him, mirrored the reflection, both aware that while the trial represented legal closure, the social and emotional closure for those affected, including the detectives themselves, remained complex, nuanced, and ongoing. Testimonies continued, each one layering context, corroboration, and emotional resonance atop the cold, hard facts of DNA, fiber evidence, and forensic reconstruction. The victim's life was reconstructed in the courtroom with painstaking attention to detail. Her routines, relationships, aspirations, the moments of ordinary joy now magnified by their tragic cessation. Expert witnesses elaborated on the psychological profile of the suspect, his methods of observation, manipulation, and control, his pattern of exploiting ordinary city life to conceal extraordinary malice. The jury absorbed the information, processing both the factual and the intangible, the forensic and the psychological, piecing together a picture that had remained obscured for over 20 years. As the trial progressed, the tension remained palpable. Each day brought renewed scrutiny, each session a confrontation with decades of unresolved trauma, both for the family and for the detectives who had dedicated their lives to unearthing the truth. Hargrove walked the streets during breaks, revisiting alleys, corners, and storefronts, reconstructing events, imagining the victim's final moments, the calculated movements of the suspect, and the faint, lingering traces of fear that had once saturated the neighborhood. Cruz reviewed cross-references, timelines, and witness statements, ensuring that every detail was consistent, corroborated, and presented with clarity, the goal being not only conviction, but the preservation of a complete, truthful narrative. Public attention intensified as local and national media covered the trial extensively. Headlines were bold, sometimes sensationalized, focusing on the arrest, the passage of decades, and the emotional toll on the victim's family. Hargrove recognized the duality. Media attention brought awareness and accountability, yet simplified the complexities, glossing over the meticulous detective work, the subtle patterns of human behavior, and the painstaking construction of a narrative that could withstand scrutiny. Cruz compiled media coverage, noting inaccuracies and highlighting areas where the public perception diverged from verified facts. Their work, both in preparation for trial and in post-trial analysis, underscored the interplay between human perception, evidence, and narrative, revealing how truth can be both illuminated and obscured simultaneously. Days turned into weeks as testimonies unfolded, each layer of detail adding depth to the emerging narrative. The suspect's calm demeanor wavered, subtle fissures revealing underlying stress, tension, and acknowledgement of exposure. Cross-examination probed inconsistencies, elicited reactions, and reinforced the coherence of the investigative timeline. The victim's life, reconstructed through witness testimony, photographs, and forensic detail, served as both evidence and homage, a narrative force compelling recognition of absence, trauma, and injustice. Hargrove and Cruz observed the proceedings with a mix of professional detachment and personal reflection, acutely aware that the culmination of decades of work was being displayed, dissected, and judged, yet understanding that the human consequences, loss, grief, resilience, would extend far beyond the courtroom walls. Even as the courtroom settled into rhythm, Hargrove felt the weight of every passing second pressing against the walls, the air dense with anticipation, the faint murmur of observers blending with the echo of his own thoughts. Cruz shuffled through notes, timelines meticulously aligned, evidence cross-verified, while the suspect sat quietly, posture rigid, eyes scanning, calculating, observing, as though he had rehearsed every gesture for decades. The city outside pulsed indifferently, subway trains rattling beneath streets, taxi horns piercing the fog of morning, the hum of urban life oblivious to the slow unraveling of history inside the courthouse. Hargrove's mind flickered to that night in 2001. The wind slicing down empty streets, distant footsteps dissolving into nothing, a fleeting glance that might have been noticed, might have been a warning. He had replayed those moments endlessly, parsing movement, behavior, and subtle indicators of malice. And now, finally, he saw the culmination of years of obsession and diligence distilled into evidence laid bare. Witnesses continued to take the stand, their voices weaving fragments of memory into a coherent, horrifying narrative. Old friends recalled trivial-seeming details, sounds, scents, passing interactions that had previously faded into the background, now illuminated with purpose. A neighbor remembered a car idling late at night, a figure standing silently beneath the streetlight, almost invisible, yet distinct in retrospect. Each recollection was a piece of the puzzle, a microscopic shard of truth that contributed to the overall picture of premeditation, stalking, and deliberate concealment. Hargrove and Cruz listened intently, noting inconsistencies, confirming alignments with forensic data, and observing the suspect's reactions. Each microexpression, subtle blink, and involuntary shift a potential key to understanding decades of evasion. Inside the lab, forensic analysts presented evidence with a cold, clinical precision that contrasted starkly with the human chaos of the courtroom. DNA matched across multiple locations, fibers aligned with almost surgical accuracy. Chemical residues indicated meticulous planning and awareness of forensic scrutiny. Hargrove traced each link mentally, visualizing the suspect's path through the city, reconstructing the predatory behavior with a focus honed by years of experience. Cruz compiled exhibits, charts, and timelines, transforming decades of investigation into a narrative that could be understood, digested, and evaluated by the jury. Every microscopic detail mattered. The accumulation of small, precise observations became a formidable wall of truth that even the most skillful defense could scarcely erode. The suspect's composure, once near impenetrable, began to show cracks. His fingers twitched imperceptibly, a sigh escaped barely audibly, a blink lingered fractionally too long. Hargrove observed, noting the subtle signs that suggested stress, recognition, and perhaps a latent fear that his carefully constructed invisibility had finally collapsed. Cruz documented these observations meticulously, understanding that human behavior, when paired with forensic certainty, created a psychological profile as compelling as any physical evidence. The courtroom, in its sterile formality, became a stage for decades of human cunning, patience, and observation to be tested under scrutiny, where every gesture, every pause, and every facial tic could carry the weight of truth. Outside, the city absorbed the unfolding drama with a strange duality of attention and indifference. Residents whispered in cafes, commuters speculated on trains, social media buzzed with fragments of information, headlines splashed across screens with dramatic flair. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a subtle acknowledgement. Life had moved forward while the shadows of 2001 lingered, a reminder of the city's complexity and the human capacity for both forgetfulness and memory. Hargrove often walked the streets during breaks, retracing alleys, doorways, and familiar corners, visualizing the victim's final movements, reconstructing the subtle interactions and unnoticed details that had once allowed the suspect to remain invisible. Cruz accompanied him periodically, sharing observations, refining timelines, aligning memory with evidence, ensuring that every facet of the case was comprehensively documented for the inevitable scrutiny of the trial. The prosecution methodically presented evidence, threading together forensic data, witness testimony, and psychological profiling into an unbroken narrative. DNA evidence confirmed the suspect's presence at key locations. Fiber analysis linked him to the victim, and behavioral patterns, reconstructed from decades of observation, revealed premeditation and a chilling familiarity with both the city and the victim's routines. Expert witnesses articulated the suspect's methods, detailing how seemingly ordinary behaviors concealed predatory intent and how meticulous planning had enabled evasion for over 2 decades. The jury absorbed this narrative, each piece reinforcing the previous, forming a coherent, undeniable depiction of the crime, its execution, and its long-hidden truth. The defense attempted to challenge the timeline, to question the validity of memories decades old, to argue the limitations of forensic reconstruction. Hargrove observed each tactic, noting the subtleties of human argument, the manipulations of perception, and the attempts to sow doubt. Crews cross-referenced these challenges with documented evidence, witness recollections, and forensic findings, ensuring that every counterargument was addressed, every inconsistency mitigated. The courtroom became a battleground, not only of legal strategy, but of decades-long human observation, persistence, and the careful orchestration of truth against deception. Every interaction was a rehearsal in anticipation, every question a probe into the delicate balance between doubt and certainty, and every answer a step closer to the final culmination of justice. Family members of the victim followed proceedings closely, their faces etched with emotion, a mixture of sorrow, resilience, and tentative hope. They shared quiet whispers, recalling memories of ordinary moments now magnified by loss. Laughter echoing through apartments, morning routines, brief smiles shared in fleeting encounters. These recollections, though painful, lent human context to the meticulous forensic narrative, transforming abstract data into lived experience. Hargrove felt the weight of their presence, the responsibility not just to the law but to human memory, to ensure that their loss was acknowledged and that the reconstruction of events honored the life taken and the lives touched. Days passed, testimony unfolded, and the narrative built by Hargrove, Crews, and the prosecution solidified into a compelling, comprehensive account of the crime. Each new revelation, each corroborated witness, each aligned piece of evidence reinforced the inexorability of truth, demonstrating that meticulous observation, patience, and scientific advancement could overcome decades of concealment. The suspect's responses, analyzed for microexpressions, shifts in gaze, and subtle behaviors, further reinforced the narrative, providing insight into the psychology that had enabled concealment and evasion. The courtroom, charged with tension, became a crucible where decades of human cunning, persistence, and obsession were distilled into the stark reality of law and accountability. Outside, the city's hum continued, indifferent yet inexorably linked to the narrative unfolding within the courthouse. Pedestrians passed without awareness, unaware of the invisible threads connecting present movement to past tragedy. Hargrove walked the streets at dusk, visualizing the night of 2001, tracing shadows, imagining trajectories, reconstructing interactions, and noting details that had long faded into memory. Crews joined him intermittently, sharing observations and ensuring that the timeline, meticulously reconstructed, remained consistent with forensic evidence and witness testimony. Together, they navigated the intersection of human memory, physical evidence, and psychological insight, piecing together a narrative that had eluded comprehension for more than 20 years, yet now stood nearly complete, poised for the final act of justice. The courtroom grew heavier as the trial edged into its most critical phase. Every detail of the investigation, every painstakingly collected piece of evidence, and every subtle psychological observation was laid bare under the unforgiving light of scrutiny. Hargrove felt the tension coil around him like a living entity, a presence that seemed to echo from the walls, from the benches, from the faces of those who had waited decades for justice. Crews adjusted notes, glancing over the cross-references once more, timelines meticulously checked, witness recollections aligned, fiber analysis validated, DNA matches reaffirmed. Outside, the city moved on, but inside these walls, time seemed suspended, every second stretched thin by the weight of 22 years of unresolved questions, of lives interrupted, of a predator finally facing the relentless judgment of both law and history. Witnesses detailed events with painstaking clarity, their words carrying the echo of memories that had lain dormant, sometimes buried beneath layers of time and trauma. They spoke of fleeting shadows, vehicles idling too long, footsteps echoing in empty streets, small details that had seemed inconsequential then, now illuminated as crucial elements in reconstructing the suspect's movements. Hargrove watched closely, noting subtle reactions in the suspect's posture, micro-expressions, a slight twitch of the hand, a blink held a fraction too long. Each small fissure in composure, however minute, became a window into decades of concealed behavior, a psychological fingerprint revealing patterns of obsession, calculation, and patience that had allowed him to remain hidden for so long. Crews cataloged these observations with precision, knowing that the interplay between forensic evidence and human behavior would be critical in presenting a compelling narrative to the jury. The prosecution's strategy was surgical, presenting the evidence with relentless clarity, threading together the forensic details, witness recollections, and behavioral analysis into an unbroken chain. Fiber matches connected the suspect to locations. DNA corroborated physical presence. Chemical residues mapped a path of meticulous premeditation. Expert testimony detailed the suspect's methods, highlighting the calculated exploitation of the city's chaos, the systematic concealment of intent, and the manipulation of social interactions to mass predatory behavior. The courtroom absorbed this evidence in a tense rhythm, each fact reinforcing the next, building an unavoidable narrative of guilt, yet still layered with complexity and the human dimensions of fear, loss, and anticipation. The detective's decades-long obsession, now manifested in the courtroom, underscored the culmination of relentless investigation, patience, and meticulous documentation. Outside the courthouse, the city pulsed with a different kind of intensity. News crews gathered, broadcasting updates, capturing reactions, analyzing every facet of the trial for public consumption. Pedestrians paused to glance at screens, commuters whispered theories to one another, and social media buzzed with speculation and outrage. For Hargrove and Cruz, the public interest was both validation and distraction. It highlighted the significance of their work, yet risked oversimplifying decades of painstaking labor. The nuances, the subtle psychological deductions, the incremental progress that had taken 22 years to achieve could easily be reduced to soundbites and headlines. Yet they knew that the truth, however complex, had been reconstructed, documented, and validated, and that no amount of simplification could erase the meticulous chain of observation and deduction that had brought the suspect to this point. As the trial progressed, the suspect's composure began to fracture in subtle, yet telling ways. His eyes darted at inconsistencies, his fingers tapped with imperceptible tension. A slight tremor betrayed the stress he could no longer fully suppress. Hargrove observed, noting the calculated shifts, the involuntary signals that revealed awareness, concern, and the faintest acknowledgement of exposure. Cruz documented each minute behavior meticulously, understanding that these micro-expressions were integral to the psychological profile, reinforcing both the narrative of calculated malice and the evidence that had been compiled over decades. The courtroom, in its formal gravity, became a theater of human behavior, where decades of concealment, strategy, and subtle manipulation were now tested under scrutiny, revealing cracks that even the suspect's practiced composure could not fully obscure. Family members of the victims sat with stoic determination, their expressions a blend of grief, resilience, and tentative hope. They whispered among themselves, recalling fleeting moments of happiness, ordinary routines that now carried the weight of absence and memory. Laughter that had once echoed through apartments, small gestures of familiarity, a touch, a glance, all now infused with profound significance. These recollections became a living context for the courtroom narrative, humanizing the forensic details, imbuing the collected evidence with emotional resonance. Hargrove felt the weight of their presence, a tangible reminder that the pursuit of justice extended beyond the legal framework, encompassing memory, acknowledgement, and the ethical imperative to honor the life that had been taken. The defense attempted to cast doubt, scrutinizing memories, highlighting potential misalignments, emphasizing the passage of time, and questioning the interpretation of evidence. Hargrove and Cruz countered with methodical precision, presenting corroborated facts, cross-reference statements, and forensic validation. Every argument was anticipated, every counterpoint addressed with documented clarity, and every attempt to undermine the prosecution's narrative met with meticulously constructed rebuttal. The interplay between doubt and certainty, between memory and evidence, created a charged atmosphere, a tension that reflected decades of unresolved investigation now culminating in public, legal confrontation. The detectives' understanding of both human behavior and procedural rigor became instrumental, ensuring that the narrative presented was coherent, compelling, and resilient against scrutiny. The jury, observing with careful attention, absorbed the intricacies of the case. Every witness, every forensic exhibit, every psychological analysis contributed to an overarching understanding of the crime, its execution, and the prolonged concealment that had evaded detection for more than 20 years. The accumulation of evidence, coupled with subtle behavioral observations, painted a portrait of premeditated violence, deliberate concealment, and a life orchestrated around evasion and observation. Hargrove and Cruz noted the jury's reactions, subtle nods, focused gazes, and moments of quiet reflection, all indicators that the narrative, painstakingly constructed over decades, was resonating, compelling recognition of both factual and human truths. Outside the courthouse, public attention remained intense. Reporters recorded statements, filmed courthouse steps, and interviewed residents, while citizens shared memories and speculations. Hargrove observed the interplay of public memory and media narrative, recognizing that while sensationalized accounts might dominate headlines, the essential truth, the meticulous reconstruction of events, remained rooted in observation, documentation, and forensic verification. Cruz documented inconsistencies in media coverage, noting where simplification or dramatization might obscure the comprehensive narrative, yet both understood that public awareness played a role in reinforcing accountability and societal acknowledgement of justice achieved. As the trial approached its final testimonies, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew taut. Every fact, every recollection, every analysis of behavior and forensic evidence contributed to the inexorable construction of truth. The suspect's responses, subtle and controlled, continued to betray faint signs of stress, recognition, and awareness of exposure. Each micro-expression was cataloged, reinforcing the narrative of premeditation, concealment, and deliberate exploitation of circumstances. Hargrove and Cruz, having devoted decades to uncovering these details, observed with both professional rigor and personal reflection, acutely aware that the culmination of their labor, patience, and meticulous observation would now be publicly evaluated, dissected, and ultimately weighed in the scales of justice. The courtroom became a crucible where decades of human cunning, persistence, and meticulous documentation converged. Witness testimony intertwined with forensic evidence, psychological analysis aligned with behavioral observation, and every piece of data, no matter how small, contributed to a narrative that was both unassailable and profoundly human. The city outside moved with indifferent rhythm, yet within these walls, the long arc of justice, the resolution of a 22-year cold case, and the recognition of human loss and resilience unfolded with relentless intensity. Hargrove felt the culmination of decades of obsession, grief, and professional dedication, understanding that the narrative constructed in this courtroom represented not only legal closure, but the acknowledgement of a life lost, a community scarred, and the enduring pursuit of truth. The tension in the courtroom reached a palpable density, almost a physical weight pressing down on every individual present. Every pair of eyes, every subtle shift in posture, Every imperceptible movement became part of the narrative, an invisible testimony to decades of unresolved history. Hargrove felt the cumulative gravity of 22 years of pursuit, the cold nights retracing streets, the countless hours poring over fragmented evidence, the obsessive cataloging of every witness statement, every fiber, every shadow that had once passed unnoticed. Crews, ever meticulous, aligned timelines once again, reviewing annotations, cross-referencing witness statements with forensic data, ensuring that every micro-detail could withstand scrutiny. The suspect sat in the defendant's chair, attempting a calm demeanor, but the air betrayed him. Every subtle twitch, every flicker of the eyes, every carefully restrained sigh carried the weight of exposure, of a life long hidden finally under the unblinking gaze of law and memory. Witnesses continued, their narratives weaving together the fragmented past with the rigor of present observation. A neighbor recalled the faint hum of a car engine on a night decades ago, the subtle figure lingering near the curb, almost imperceptible under the flickering street lamp. Another described the abrupt departure of a familiar silhouette from an apartment building, a movement previously unnoticed yet now resonating with renewed significance. Hargrove noted the nuances, the shifts in the suspect's composure, the micro-expressions, the imperceptible tightening of fingers or subtle hesitations, all contributing to a psychological profile painstakingly built over decades. Crews cataloged every observation, understanding that human behavior, paired with forensic evidence, could construct an unassailable narrative that transcended mere physical proof. The prosecution's strategy intensified, presenting a seamless integration of forensic science, witness testimony, and behavioral analysis. DNA samples, meticulously preserved for over 2 decades, confirmed presence beyond doubt. Fibers aligned with precision, chemical residues mapped deliberate movements, and behavioral patterns revealed a premeditation that had exploited ordinary city life for years. Expert witnesses elaborated on psychological nuances, the calculated observation of routines, the subtle exploitation of urban anonymity, the orchestration of social interactions to conceal intent. The jury absorbed this synthesis, each fact reinforcing the last, constructing an inevitable narrative of guilt while simultaneously illuminating the depth of premeditated malice that had allowed decades of concealment. The defense attempted to cast shadows of doubt, scrutinizing memory, questioning the precision of forensic methods, and emphasizing the potential for temporal distortion in human recollection. Hargrove observed their strategies, noting the subtle art of obfuscation, the psychological maneuvering, the reliance on uncertainty inherent in decades-old events. Crews countered methodically, presenting corroborated facts, revalidated evidence, and meticulously aligned timelines. The courtroom became a battleground of intellect, persistence, and the interplay between human observation and forensic certainty. Every argument, every counterpoint, every gesture, every expression contributed to the unfolding narrative, a narrative that had been decades in the making and was now being tested under relentless scrutiny. Family members of the victim sat in quiet intensity, their emotions raw yet restrained, a tapestry of grief, resilience, and tentative hope. Memories of ordinary moments, morning routines, shared meals, laughter echoing through apartments, were revisited silently in their minds, each recollection lending context and emotional depth to the forensic narrative. These personal histories humanized the evidence, transforming abstract fibers, DNA strands, and behavioral patterns into testimony about a life interrupted, a story violently paused, and a community irreversibly altered. Hargrove felt the weight of their presence, the ethical imperative to ensure that their loss, pain, and resilience were acknowledged through the meticulous presentation of evidence and narrative. The suspect's composure began to crumble under relentless observation. Micro-expressions flickered with recognition, stress, and subtle fear. Fingers tapped in a regular rhythm, shoulders tightened, and fleeting glances betrayed a consciousness of exposure. Hargrove cataloged each nuance, each involuntary gesture a testament to the psychological weight of accountability now unavoidable. Cruz cross-referenced these observations with prior behavioral analysis, confirming consistencies and reinforcing the narrative of premeditated manipulation, strategic concealment, and calculated evasion that had defined the suspect's life for over 2 decades. The courtroom itself became an instrument of revelation, a crucible where subtle behavioral cues merged with tangible evidence to reveal the truth of the crime. Outside, the city reflected a parallel narrative. Media crews broadcast live updates, pedestrians discussed fragments of the case, and social media churned with speculation, outrage, and morbid fascination. Hargrove recognized the duality. While public awareness highlighted the significance of the investigation, it also risked simplifying the intricate web of observation, analysis, and deduction that had taken 22 years to unravel. Cruz documented the coverage, noting inaccuracies, emphasizing the critical difference between sensationalism and the painstakingly reconstructed narrative of events. They both understood that the trial was as much about the presentation of truth as it was about legal justice. Perception, narrative control, and the public's understanding were now intertwined with decades of meticulous work. The prosecution moved toward closure, summarizing evidence with deliberate precision. Timelines were reaffirmed, forensic links reiterated, behavioral patterns reinforced. DNA, fiber, and chemical analysis were presented alongside psychological profiling, forming an integrated, compelling argument that could withstand both legal challenge and public scrutiny. The victim's life was reconstructed in vivid detail. Routines, social interactions, favorite locations, subtle habits, all providing context to the sequence of events and highlighting the deliberate exploitation by the suspect. The jury was guided through this tapestry, each thread of evidence interwoven into a narrative that left little room for ambiguity, doubt, or misinterpretation. Witness testimonies revealed emotional nuance, further humanizing the narrative. Friends and neighbors recalled moments once trivial, a fleeting smile, a sudden absence, an unremarkable movement. These details, previously unnoticed, now provided critical context when aligned with forensic evidence and behavioral profiling. Hargrove observed the suspect's reactions, noting fleeting twitches, subtle hesitation, and micro-expressions betraying stress and awareness. Cruz ensured that each observation was documented, integrated into the broader case, reinforcing the inescapable conclusion of premeditation, deliberate concealment, and the calculated exploitation of the urban landscape over decades. The courtroom rhythm intensified as closing arguments approached. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every psychological observation contributed to an unavoidable narrative. The suspect, once confident in decades of concealment, now faced the cumulative force of meticulous observation, scientific advancement, and relentless human determination. The prosecution's narrative wove together the human, forensic, and psychological threads into a cohesive, compelling account of crime, evasion, and the ultimate pursuit of justice. Hargrove and Cruz, having devoted decades to this case, recognized the culmination of obsessive dedication, professional rigor, and human persistence unfolding in real time before them. Even as proceedings neared conclusion, the city's pulse remained indifferent yet subtly entwined with the narrative inside. Pedestrians moved past, oblivious to the reconstruction of events, unaware of the decades-long pursuit finally achieving public recognition. Yet the echoes of 2001 lingered, shadows on the streets, the memory of footsteps fading into silence, a life violently interrupted, and the subtle tension of a predator finally exposed. Hargrove walked those streets during breaks, imagining trajectories, reconstructing events, replaying micro-moments that had once evaded detection. Cruz accompanied him intermittently, refining notes, aligning memories with evidence, and ensuring that the narrative remained coherent, compelling, and accurate. Together, they maintained the delicate balance between observation, evidence, and human behavior, a balance critical to both trial success and the preservation of truth. The courtroom held its breath as the final testimonies concluded, a tense silence settling over the room, heavy with anticipation, dread, and the weight of decades-long uncertainty. Hargrove scanned the jury, observing the subtle shifts in posture, the narrowing of eyes, the quiet contemplation, each movement a silent measure of absorption, comprehension, and judgment. Cruz meticulously reviewed notes one last time, ensuring that every detail of evidence, every micro-expression observed in the suspect, every corroborated timeline was accounted for, documented, and ready to support the culmination of decades of relentless pursuit. Outside, the city moved in its habitual rhythm, indifferent yet deeply intertwined with the invisible threads of past tragedy and present justice, a reminder that while life continues, echoes of 2001 lingered in the spaces where ordinary moments had once intersected with extraordinary violence. The prosecution delivered its closing argument with precision, weaving together a tapestry of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and psychological analysis. DNA confirmed presence at critical locations. Fibers and chemical residues traced deliberate movements. Behavioral patterns revealed premeditation and methodical concealment. Every detail, painstakingly collected over 22 years, was aligned into a cohesive narrative that left no room for ambiguity. Hargrove noted the intensity of the delivery, the way each statement emphasized the patience, cunning, and calculated nature of the suspect's actions. Cruz followed along, marking the cross-references, reinforcing the psychological deductions with corroborated forensic data, ensuring that every angle, every subtlety, every nuance of human behavior was presented in alignment with incontrovertible facts. The defense sought to fracture certainty, emphasizing the erosion of memory over decades, questioning the interpretation of minor inconsistencies and highlighting procedural gaps. Yet Hargrove and Cruz had anticipated every angle, cross-referenced evidence, meticulously cataloged witness statements, and psychological profiles constructed from decades of observation countered each attempt at doubt. Every subtle manipulation was exposed by a web of scientific precision and human insight, the accumulated weight of 22 years of investigation pressing relentlessly against the defenses of ambiguity. The courtroom itself became a crucible where patience, observation, and the enduring pursuit of truth were tested against the artifice of doubt, where human behavior, forensic science, and narrative cohesion merged to reveal the inescapable trajectory of accountability. The suspect, seated with an attempt at composure, could not fully mask the unraveling tension. Micro-expressions flickered across his face, a tightness around the eyes, a slight tremor in the fingers, subtle shifts in posture betraying internal struggle. Hargrove cataloged these details silently, noting the alignment of observed stress indicators with the cumulative presentation of evidence. Cruz annotated behaviors with methodical precision, ensuring that every psychological cue reinforced the prosecution's narrative of premeditation, concealment, and strategic manipulation over decades. Each imperceptible reaction became part of a larger mosaic, illustrating the intersection of human observation, forensic rigor, and the inexorable revelation of truth. Family members of the victim remained poised, faces etched with grief, resilience, and a tentative sense of closure. Their whispered recollections, the quiet sharing of memories, lent human context to the analytical presentation of evidence. The courtroom absorbed this duality, the precision of science interlaced with the profound weight of human experience. Hargrove felt the resonance of their presence, the ethical imperative to honor memory, grief, and the enduring impact of loss. Cruz noted their engagement, their reactions, the subtle acknowledgement of narrative coherence, the reinforcement of the moral and human dimensions of justice beyond legal verdicts. As the jury prepared for deliberation, a hush settled over the courtroom, dense with anticipation and the gravity of the moment. The accumulated evidence, behavioral observations, and psychological reconstructions had formed a narrative of undeniable cohesion. The suspect sat in quiet tension, every muscle taut, every glance fleeting yet loaded with apprehension. Hargrove and Cruz observed, noting the culmination of decades of investigation, the intersection of human memory, forensic advancement, and relentless pursuit. Outside, the city's pulse remained indifferent. Yet the courthouse steps, the streets around, and the collective consciousness of the community reflected the tension, the expectation, and the anticipation of reckoning long deferred. Minutes stretched into hours as the jury deliberated, each member weighing the complex interplay of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and behavioral analysis. The silent intensity was mirrored in the courtroom observers, journalists documenting, residents speculating, families holding vigil for decades of unanswered questions. Hargrove revisited his mental notes, retracing every investigative step, every subtle interaction, every microexpression, every fragment of evidence collected over more than 20 years. Cruz ensured all documentation was precise, timelines coherent, psychological observations aligned with factual data, and that the narrative presented to the jury was both comprehensive and compelling, a synthesis of human behavior, forensic science, and meticulous investigation. As the hours passed, the suspect's tension deepened. Subtle signs of stress became more evident. Fingers drummed an irregular rhythm. Shoulders tightened imperceptibly. Glances flicked nervously toward the jury box. Hargrove noted each nuance, every imperceptible fissure in composure reinforcing the broader narrative of concealed guilt, now confronting exposure. Cruz cataloged these behaviors in real time, aware that decades of careful observation, meticulous analysis, and relentless pursuit were converging in this singular moment, where the culmination of human diligence, procedural rigor, and scientific advancement would meet the accountability long delayed. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, the jury returned. The room was thick with anticipation, every heart beating in synchrony with the unspoken gravity of the moment. The judge called the session to order, voices hushed, cameras focused, spectators leaning forward, absorbing every motion, every word. Hargrove felt a convergence of exhaustion, relief, and lingering tension, decades of effort distilled into the seconds that now unfolded. Cruz maintained meticulous attention, ready to note procedural nuances, ensuring the narrative integrity remained intact to the very end. The suspect's composure, taught for decades, wavered subtly, every micro-expression a silent acknowledgement of the approaching verdict, of decades of concealment confronted by the cumulative weight of meticulous investigation. The foreperson stood, delivering the words that had eluded resolution for more than 2 decades. The verdict, pronounced with solemn clarity, reverberated through the courtroom. The culmination of persistent investigation, forensic precision, witness collaboration, and psychological insight. Gasps echoed from the gallery. Whispers rippled through family members, the community, and media representatives alike. Hargrove and Cruz allowed themselves a momentary recognition of the long path that had led to this point. Decades of observation, persistence, and unyielding pursuit of truth crystallized into a moment of closure, yet imbued with the complex resonance of loss, trauma, and the enduring echoes of lives irrevocably altered. The suspect's reaction, measured yet strained, revealed the profound psychological impact of accountability, the inexorable consequence of human actions, and the inescapable recognition of exposure after decades of concealment.